average growth rate of about 24%. Some reports even predict that by 2030, the global fintech industry is going to be valued at 1 trillion US dollars,
Yep.
right? So it's a beast, a behemoth on its own, this industry.
Yep.
And I would love to hear straight from you, with this rise in fintech and how customer preferences now leaning towards digital payments and this mode. So, seeing the current scenario, what do you think is going to be the future of fintech?
See, you have to understand how so fintechs are not new into the world.
Mm-hmm.
People have named it in different scenarios and contexts, but that essentially is something that has been happening for decades. You take an example of how before 1980s banks used to dominate the entire payment space.
Mm-hmm.
With legacy banks coming into picture, India being more open to formal credit in 1990s, NBFCs were taking overhead. So last 2 decades were essentially underserved by banks, where NBFCs took a toll from a scenario, and NBFCs were serving the population which banks were not able to serve, uh, be it individuals, be it businesses. The fintechs over the last decade have transformed the entire NBFC and banking space, where they've used banks and NBFCs as an infrastructure, but penetrated to the audience which essentially neither of them were able to cater down, or in fact, if they were catering down, were not that efficient. Take for an
Mm-hmm.
example, the last time you went to a bank to withdraw currency notes, you don't
I
even
don't.
remember. You don't. No, nobody remember. Nobody cares because
Mm,
99% of our transactions are digital today, and that's because of the fact
absolutely.
that we have evolved immensely over the last not even 5 years. I would say last 3 years have been exponential. Be it UPI's
Mm-hmm.
transformation journey, be it penetration of different models, be it in a scenario where even the lowest segment of the value chain are now transacting digitally. Who would have imagined, say, an auto driver or a rickshaw puller being accepting money on wallets and bank accounts? For for it to have, obviously there are multiple layers of what has happened in the past, be it from digital adoption to Aadhaar to the entire value chain of giving the internet connectivity to the last mile holder. But you have to be there to experience it. And India,
Mm-hmm.
fortunately, has the best fintech infra in the world. I
Right.
mean, today also, much of our payments happen through NEFT RTGS. When you even for business to business payments, that's where the forte lies in for the next growth. We feel that when you compare this with US still follows check system for 47 odd percent of the payments. So we are way
Mm-hmm.
ahead of them. They follow 6 decade old practices. We are much ahead of them, and I think that's where the power of innovation will come into the play. UPI, I think, has been here for over a decade with India. They are
Mm-hmm.
recently adopting UPI movements. So we are much ahead of the Western one, and I think with every business cycles, this is the cycle where it is not just India's decade; it's India's century.
Wow, wonderfully said. It's India's century. World Cup
Yeah.
started today, so that makes even it's more relevant. So speaking of, it's been here for a decade. We've all gotten used to UPIs, and seriously, bank withdrawals, cash withdrawals. It's kind of like I didn't remember thing of the past. So the way it has transformed how we just make payments peer to peer. What are the upcoming innovations you see happening in fintech industry? What are the other potential applications that fintech is looking at?
The opportunity is immense. Now we are looking at transacting through NPCI's UPI with Singapore, with UAE region. So that gives us a different sense of money flow in terms of cross-border domain. With CBDC
Okay.
coming into play, central bank digital currency, e-rupee, what we call,
Mm-hmm.
it makes even more ease for transact money locally and globally. So, for example,
Okay.
instead of you it's a UPI moment for cross border, I would say. When it comes to domestic payments, we feel that much of it has transitioned out for retail and consumer market, but business payments are yet to see that evolution. So business driven payments, B2B payments will essentially drive the next big thing in India. And we
Mm-hmm.
feel that we are at a cusp of very interesting things happening in India. So essentially, right time to build in India, right time to create in India.
Amazing. So, you definitely mentioned having India having the best digital public infrastructure, right? Which,
Yep.
because of which this adoption so much of fintech,
Yep.
UPI payments, it has happened. What are some of the other key drivers for the growth of this industry at the pace at which it is happening?
See, I would say there are three drivers for it essentially. One was Aadhaar movement, where every person had digital identity. Second was
Mm,
NPCI's and RBI's push forward to a UPI movement thing in India. And third, and the most
mm.
important and enabler was GeoWave. Geo not
Uh-huh.
only enabled the lowest cost provider, internet provider to the last mile consumer, it also made them self reliant. So, all three were the key pillars. Then there was one value driven change. So, everything, so for every change to happen, there is a small catalyst event. For us,
Mm-hmm.
it was COVID. So COVID made sure that for that 1 year or disruptive period, intentionally or unintentionally, we forgot how cash used to happen. Likewise, some of it
Right.
was pushed by demonetization movement also in India. So
Mm-hmm.
demonetization, COVID were essentially the catalyst for the three strong pillars like we discussed.
Okay, well, thank you for that insight. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you before you started working on your own fintech startup,
Yeah,
and we will come to it right now. You were the COO of Legal Pay, right?
yeah, yeah.
So I just wanna understand what was that impetus that pushed you from being a CEO to a legal and debt financing platform to going to create your own fintech startup.
No, no, that's very fair. So much of it is driven by five-letter word that's behind me, create. I think
Uh-huh.
this is the time for India to create innovative businesses to drive what's happening in the world. With Legal Pay, definitely, I was part of the founding structure. I made sure that for the last 3 odd years, it was an exponential growth journey. We scaled from one member team to a 60 odd member team, exponentially grew the book, tried various innovative debt product structures in India, syndicated a few debt deals in interim financing. So I think worked with one of the best big fours, including Pricewaterhouse, Deloitte, etc. So I feel that this was time for me to. So there is a Maslow's need hierarchy theory. Now I'm moving a level up where uh, I actually wanted to create something of my own and take it to the end of the world. So yeah, that's where the value of creating something of your own is something that drives you each day.
I guess that drives really everything in this world, isn't it? That drive to create really does make the world go round.
Yeah.
Nicely said. Uh, so, when you set out to have your own startup, what was the initial challenges or roadblocks you faced?
There are
That
days. Actually, every day is a new beginning, every day is a new fight, and every day there are a new set of challenges. That's the beauty of startup. In fact, with Legal Pay, also in my last role, I was more or less leading the entire operations piece of it. So have been accustomed to such uncertainties in time. Obviously, while when it's like I mean, I never thought it was not my own startup. I worked day in and day out to make sure that and I think that's something that I even encourage everyone to do that in a similar fashion. Whatever they do, whatever work they do, that you should be content while sleeping at night. That today I have achieved something. Today I have done at least a value addition. Today I am sleeping peacefully because I have utilized my day. Because as one of the most inspiring person that I've known is Mr. Kakkar, and he always say that there are roughly on 10,000 odd days that you can make an impact to the world, because rest of days either you are not in senses or are not your impactful days. So if you are just living for 10,000 odd days, make sure that you are making sure that every day counts. So it's just 10,000 odd days journey. So make sure that every day is fulfilling for you.
Wow, that is a
This is
really
the
good
first.
advice.
Yeah.
That's a really nice way of looking at things.
That's
Um,
essentially what your life is. 10,000 odd
yeah,
days, live it to the fullest.
I did not need that today. I will not go into existential crisis right now. No, thank you. But no, kidding aside, that's a really good way of looking at things and making every day count.
Yeah.
So while you set out to do this startup, did you have your co-founders with you, or did you have a team in
Yes,
mind? The kind of
yes, yes.
okay.
So we have our co-founders, and currently running it bootstrap, but essentially we'll raise
Mm,
funds also, take it to the next level. But the idea is to create in a sustainable environment, because much of the value creation that we feel is not just driven by unicorn valuation, but also the value additions businesses see it. See, at the end, startup is not something new to the Indian. In fact, even a small shop owner is also a owner of a startup. It's just that he's starting his whatever expertise that he has for selling, etc. So the idea is India is land of opportunities, India is land of entrepreneurs. So it's onto our blood. It's just that we are creating or calling it fancy words of startups, etc., unicorns and whatnot. But the idea is to create something meaningful, something magical,
mhm,
which is beyond you. Something so a definition of a company that we all are told is something that goes on forever. The principle of perpetuity, that a company is something that lives beyond you. So create something that lives beyond you, something magical, something truly great, which outpasses even what you can achieve in your life. Think it from a
mhm.
lens of what Infosys. So Infosys not was not built in a day. It took good 2.5 or decades to build Infosys what it is today. So
Yeah.
similar to that.
Yeah, and now it is a
Yeah.
backbone, an important pillar of the Indian IT industry. Can't imagine it without it. Yes,
So,
nicely said.
it's a journey for everyone. So just riding the journey.
So yeah, the next question I wanted to ask again, it brings me back to founding your startup. So whenever a way of doing something changes, right? There's rapid technological advancement. The lawmakers, the policymakers, the regulatory bodies, right? Sometimes they can't move fast enough,
Yep.
right? So, regarding fintech industry in the last 1 decade, where it has really taken root in India in the form that it is in today. So, in these last 10 years, what kind of regulatory changes, good or bad, you've seen happening that has somehow contributed to both the growth of the fintech industry as well as the hurdles or the hoops that the founders and entrepreneurs and then stakeholders had to jump through? What are some of those regulatory?
Very fair and very pertinent question. See, it reminds me of one of the quote for Vijay Shekhar, who is founder of Paytm. He always said that building a business, you can't expect regulations from day zero. It's like waiting for a train or on a bus stop to arrive. Till the time you don't have product ready, you can't have regulations to drive it, and that's where
Mm,
we always regulations will be more or less post facto. Whatever you have done, people would try to, and in government and businesses as so the regulators and the government do not necessarily try to refrain you from doing anything, but they
mm,
also need to ensure that, because at the end it's dealing with public money, and fintech, obviously RBI is one of the strongest regulatory bodies across the globe. Because we have a robust infrastructure, they also need to take, say for example, make sure that there are no money laundering, etc. happening. They are well within the purview. There are not predatory practices such as charging it, a very high competitive rates, etc. So the idea was to make sure that businesses work within the well-defined boundaries. And that's where we feel that the regulator, obviously, some decisions can be good, some decisions can be bad. I'm not going into that debate, but the idea is the need for a regulator to step in is not just to create hurdle for businesses, is to set
Hmm.
boundaries.
Hmm.
And there is enough and lot that you can do within the well capitalized boundaries that are set by regulators or governing bodies, implying that well businesses, so these boundaries are not made out of you, these boundaries are actually discussed first with different businesses,
Right.
with different bodies, etc. Then you take, and these are usually accustomed to practice. Say, for example, for FLDG scenarios, first loss default guarantees,
Okay.
they gave ample amount of time to fintechs to transform, or do away with such synthetic lending structures. And even with first loss default guarantees, they came out with 5% odd as the limit, which is obviously take or protects the interest for different NBFCs, but does not stop innovation. So it's how you look at.
Okay.
I always feel that regulators, the job of they are doing their job and they are doing exponentially well in making sure that there are no bad practices. But businesses have to realize that मतलब वो दायरे में रह के काम करोगे तो हो जाएगा, उसके बाहर जाने की ट्राई करोगे तो रोकेंगे, बात खत्म है, उतनी सी है. So you have to
Interesting.
innovate
Yes.
limits the
Totally
sector.
there. Has to be a balance, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Has to be a balance between innovation and responsibility. And again, a lot of people say they don't like, speaking of my parents' generation,
Yeah.
it took us so much time to get them to use these UPI apps.
Yep.
Before that, it took us so much time to convince them to withdraw cash from the ATM and not from the teller at the bank with your
Yep.
passbook,
Yep. Yep.
right? So ये जो adoption या फिर जो uptake है उसमें the sort of like people feel hesitant is
Mm.
because they say cyber security, data privacy, fraud. They are so worried about it, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
So, what can you tell my mom's generation about cybersecurity measures or data privacy measures that fintech is working on, has worked on to make transactions secure?
See, with innovation, definitely there are people who try and use scenarios and make sure कि वो कहीं ना कहीं loopholes निकालेंगे. I think that's, and in fact, with India being cusp of innovation, there'll be more or less people who would try their level best to squeeze out some or the other loopholes from the scenario. So I perfectly get your point that older generation need to be educated of, and that's something that regulator RBI has been doing fantastically well by launching such. But I think much of the role has to be played by our generation, where we need to
Mm-hmm.
educate, not to give OTPs, not to kill, or click on malicious links, etc. But the idea
Mm-hmm.
always revolves on the fact that, see, even there were frauds with ATM transactions also. There were fraud with cross-border transactions also. So idea is always been to be as cautious as and prudent as possible, and education can only be the solution. So always try to educate, and I think the younger generation has that responsibility, because someday our generation after us will educate us of how to use different modes of scenarios. Somewhere down the line we'll also be in their shoes, and so it's
Definitely.
our responsibility to make sure that the generation older to us gets it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, yes, I really do believe that, after a certain point,
Yeah.
it's our responsibility to
Yeah.
educate ourselves first on the risks, the pros, cons of everything,
Yeah.
and then introduce our parents to that technology because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's their hard earned money and
Yeah.
they do deserve their peace of mind, man.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
goes to it goes without saying for all the parents. If there are
Yeah.
any parents who are listening to us, watching to us, thank you for everything you did. We will help you with fintech.
Yeah.
You can leave your question in the comments below
Yeah.
and we will answer them. Okay, so yes, so we spoke about security. And so now I just want to understand the uh, we spoke about, okay, there's so much growth that has happened and so much growth that is going to happen. So obviously we are going to need good and efficient talent in this industry. There are
Hmm.
certain specific skills that we must be looking for. What are some of those skills that are in demand right now, or which are good to invest our time and effort in if we want to join fintech industry as talent?
See,
Or
the problem
yeah.
education that I feel now, we are still so obviously CBSE does their own sweet job, but
Mm,
what the generation today is being taught, in fact, the books are similar to what was taught to us 20 odd years ago, in fact 10 odd or 15 odd years ago. So
yeah.
because our education system does not realize that practical exposure is something that is missing from the scenario, people
Right.
now specifically in such era need to upskill them.
Hmm.
And trust me on this, no edtech, no education university can solve it for you. You have to
Right.
upskill yourself. And by upskilling, I mean be accustomed to uh, uh, being put in uncomfortable situations. Always look out for solutions and try to be inquisitive. Once you're inquisitive of solving something, you would understand there is so much that you can add value to yourself. And I would say that if there are 7 days in a week, which, say for example, if you are awake for roughly around 100 odd hours, at least try and squeeze 1 hour from that 100-hour week to learn something new, be it any domain that you wish to, but try to squeeze that 1 hour for yourself, because
Right.
it is like an investment to you. Whatever small activity, say for example, if you're a graphic designer, try different modes of AI generation of images, etc. If you want to learn coding, just try and squeeze out some time for it. uh, don't refrain yourself, just be a learner throughout your life.
That is an advice actually that gets discussed a lot. Be a learner throughout your life. And I have now taken this as my own funda also. ये भाई
Yep.
सब कह रहे तो सही कह रहे होंगे. Uh, but yeah, upskilling is so important. Upskilling yourself in itself is a skill right now that we need. We need
Yep.
to get up, right? And there's, like you said, there's generative AI, there's language learning models, and there's so
Yep.
much. And I, even myself, not being from a tech background, I have thought in the past, even the language coding, मेरे बस की नहीं है. What am I gonna do? How is this gonna help me? Oh, AI, it's not for me. But personal experience, I'm telling you, it's always good to at least explore these upcoming technologies. You will always find a way to make it useful in your own job. If
Yep.
not, a new job, even in your current job, it will going to help you.
Yeah.
So
See,
I
it's always
completely.
to
Hmm.
be updated. See, I personally have that FOMO, I would say, where, see, I always try to challenge myself, because I feel that if I don't know something, I always try and make sure that at least if a conversation is happening in a room, at least I know a bit of it, if not everything of it. So obviously you
Hmm.
can't be master of everything, but at least you should get to know what is happening around you. So that fear is essentially, I would say, pulls me off and makes me to thrive it. People can have different considerations. Some are inquisitive by nature, but I think you should know yourself. If you are true and honest to yourself, that will drive
Hmm.
you. And I think with even with a smaller step, I think things can turn around. Just show up. That's it.
Yeah, it was so simple and yet so wonderful.
Yeah.
Showing up is job half done. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to ask you that when you're hiring for your own team,
Hmm.
apart from this drive or this curiosity to learn, explore, apart from this, what else do you look for in a candidate or a person to feel, yeah, worthy enough of my team or a good
See,
value
all
addition to my team?
these skills of, see, even anyone can be made to learn a new skill, anyone can be made to work hard. But two things that I essentially feel are something that are non-negotiable for me while hiring someone for any role. And you cannot teach these two things at all. This has to be in your character. One is empathy, how considerate you are with respect to other people that you work with, because you cannot make good businesses without good teams. And if the other individuals do not have empathy, they do not coordinate well or gel within the team, this is one bad individual will spoil the entire team's culture and motivation. So empathy is something that is non-negotiable. Second are ethics, how
Right.
you behave when nobody else is watching are ethics. So these two are non-negotiable, for me, should be non-negotiable for anyone. And these two things cannot be taught to any person. These are in your character. So empathy and ethics are something very difficult to judge, very difficult to maintain. And how you treat others and how you act when nobody else is watching is something that defines your character.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that bit of information. Because when we look out on job portals, we do read the job description and the skills required, but we don't ever get to know what the person on the other side of the table wants to see
Yeah.
apart from what's on the CV.
And always give
Thank you so
examples of such
much.
scenario. In fact, whenever I interview candidates, these two are patent questions for me. That show me an example where you have showed empathy. Give me an example when you showed ethics when nobody else was watching, and you get to know that how the other person thinks, what type of the character
Yeah,
of us. Yeah.
that is a brilliant question. When were you ethical when no one was watching? Amazing. Um,
So,
now,
so
so we've
just to
dis-
add on it, there's
yes.
a very strong incidence on it, and that's something that I learned while I was visiting a school in it is a Gurgaon school, my ex school, etc. And there was a box of toffees or chocolates, whatever it was. They used to keep it in the lower classes up to class five. They used to have these boxes written that you can pick whatever chocolate or trophy you want and drop off the money equivalent to it. So nobody is guarding
Okay.
that, nobody is watching it, but you have to be true to yourself. And it was named as room of kindness, that go or pick up whatever you like, but be make. And I think this is something that stayed with me. So this is something I think should I mean, why there are closed vending machines? If you trust your employees, why not have open vending machines?
That's a very fascinating thought, a very real world thought. Yes.
Have open
Thanks for
vending machines
sharing
in
that
your
story. Huh?
organizations, right? You don't trust your employees that you have closed vending machines. They
Right.
won't trust your employees, trust your gut. So that's it.
Yeah, yeah. Show that you are trustworthy. Earn my trust, more like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Surely. Um, I have always noticed this. Again, speaking of joining fintech or any industry for that matter, like we all have our expertise and skills, and often we want to do something different in our careers or join a
Correct.
differently that industry that's different. We hesitate from clicking on that apply button or send button. What would you say to those of us?
See, I would say we all are scared. We uh, we are taught in a fashion where fear is embedded into our culture from our childhood days. So we have that fear of jumping, fear of getting into something that's not charted for us. Getting out of our comfort zone is something that restrained us from doing extraordinary things. I would say we still fear from taking unusual steps. So that's something that is embedded into our culture. We always feel that ये हो गया तो क्या करेंगे, etc. So I would say don't fear from it, take it as a challenge, and we have a very strong social system. I think if things go bad, there would be enough and good people to support you. So just have a leap of faith, jump into it. If you truly deserve onto something, go for it.
Yeah. It's an analogy. Take the training wheels off of a bicycle.
Yes, yes.
Give it a
What
shot.
will happen? I mean, you will fall off once, twice, 10 times, dozen, 2 dozen, 5 dozen. Someday you'll learn to cycle right.
Yeah, that is true. And then it feels so great when you finally learn. Yeah, yeah. So
So it
thanks for
works.
that advice. I wanted to ask that. You were saying something?
No, I was saying that we feel that in fact, we have the best social system. If say for example, you want to do something, but that comes at a pay cut, substantial, go for it. You have would have
Hmm.
invested your 1.5, 2 years of your career to learn something new, and then build on
Yeah,
it. You will say
yeah.
if you're earning lesser amount of funds in the start of your career, it will pay off as you grow.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
always listen to your heart and feel what you truly need. Be true to yourself. If you're not happy working what you do, just don't do it.
Yeah. Better to take a risk
Yeah.
and fail than to always think, "Arey, what if I had done it?"
Yep.
Yeah. That is one regret I don't want to have ever, and I don't want
Nobody wants
anybody
to
to
have
have
it, but
ever.
people think that,
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, so I think it's time we start wrapping up, but I still have one very important question for you, without which I cannot, in my good conscience, end this conversation. So, what would you tell someone out there
hmm.
who is an aspiring entrepreneur, wants to be an entrepreneur, maybe or maybe not in the fintech industry to be specific, but just generally, आपने तो क्या advice देंगे?
See, two things. One, for becoming a good entrepreneur, you have to be a good employee first. If you
Right.
can't work under someone, if you can't be true to your organization, if you can't put your uh, hard work to make sure, being entrepreneur is not easy job. In fact, it's not something that you're doing something of your own. You have investors, you have employees to answer. So in fact, your accountability increases. So be accountable, so that if you can't be a good employee, you can't be a good entrepreneur. Second, just to check if entrepreneurship is for you or not, go and work for an early stage startup at least for 2.5 odd years. Even if that comes for a very lesser pay or a pay cut, it's perfectly fine, because that will tell you and give you an experience of what not to do when you do something of your own. And that's very important, because you will
Absolutely.
obviously have thousand odd things to do, but there are those 10 things that you should avoid doing. Knowing, experiencing those 10 things is something that will differentiate you from others, and I think that would be the start of something very big.
Hmm? Nicely said. I lied. That was not my last question. I have one more question. So my last, and I promise this is my last. My last question is for your startup
Hmm.
that you are now working on. It's early stage. It's
Yeah.
bootstrapped. What is your long-term vision for it? You spoke about leaving a legacy of sorts, right? Consistency, building
Yep.
something that lasts. The word create
Yep.
behind you.
Yep.
What do you want to create? What do you want to see it become in that long term?
See, I would say never plan future in advance. You
Oh.
can only plan the next, say, I would be honest, you can only plan 6 months of your future. That's it. You should never plan. Obviously, you should have an idea where you want to take it, but just plan for the near future, 6 to 12 months at most. Give your full potential effort to it and see where it goes. So always, and it has always been my motto, take life how it comes. You never know what will work for you, never know where it will work for you. At least you should not have a regret that this is something that I never did, etc. Life is very short to have regrets in. So I think
Yeah.
just take life how it comes and create something that people would remember you for. That's it.
Yeah. So no could have, would have, should have. Do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So thank you. You
Thank
summarized
you
it.
so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kashish. This was
Thank
actually
you.
fun. I learned. I got to think out loud actually.
Yeah.
And certainly, fintech makes a bit more sense in my head now.
Yeah.
And I hope that translates into how I help others in my life
Yeah.
trust and adapt this, I wouldn't say it's the technology of the future, it is right now.
And it is happening.
Thank
It is happening
It
at a
is.
much larger scale. I think 6x growth just in NEFT transactions to pre-COVID levels. People are not at all transacting in cash now. So I think that's something that's happening rapidly. Just go for it, take the moment now, and it will explode. India's century is here.
Wonderful. So you heard it here from Kashish Grover, a fintech entrepreneur himself. I am
Yeah.
Rishita. This is our Skill Arbitrage YouTube channel. And again, thank you, Kashish, so much for speaking to us. And if we get any questions later on in the comments, we will certainly reach out to you. We'd love to let our listeners know. Um, and if you would like to continue watching similar videos, then tune into the Skill Arbitrage YouTube channel every week, Thursdays at 8 p.m. And subscribe the channel and like the video so that you get it in your suggestions. Again, this is Rishita. That's Kashish. Thank you and good night.
Yeah.
Bye.